5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond with your host, Justin.
But before we get started, how was your Geek Week?
And co-hosts Dan and Jason.
You have to be willing to let the dice help you tell the story.
Okay, look, this year I'm going to stop mispronouncing words. Join us as we cover board games to war games and beyond.
And welcome back to Tabletop and Beyond. I am your host for this Winning Warcry podcast, and I'm here with my co-host Dan. Dan, welcome back, buddy.
Hey, great to be here. How's it going?
It's going. We have had a lot of stuff happen in the last month. A lot of big stuff.
Yeah, it's really been an exciting two and a half months for the game in general. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it. I think we're going to cover a lot today.
We are. So today, we're specifically going to talk about your adventure at Adepticon, which, by the way, I was super jealous of you. I was, moping around the house, and my wife's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm not at Adepticon.
You should definitely come next year.
Yeah, exactly. I really want to. So, we're going to talk about your kind of foray into Adepticon, and one of the big news items is that at the very last minute, I was asked to host the Warhammer Grand Tournament at the Nova Open. So, feeling pretty good.
Which is big news. I feel we're not burying the lead here. It's only a minute into the cast, but right. I feel like you didn't give that the hype that it deserves. You are going to be the TO for the Warcry GT at the Nova Open.
Yeah, I'm still kind of sinking in because I'm part of me is what did I get myself into? You know, and then the other part of it is I really want to make Warcry a big thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I saw was that Kill Team has a tournament on, I think it's Thursday, with 64 people in it.
Yeah.
You know, and they had 4 16-person pods that you would play through, and then you take the winners and winners and winners. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they had that on a Friday thing, and I was like, man, I really want to get Warcry to that point.
So I was actually talking with some of my buddies because I actually scheduled with a few friends a time to teach a few of them the game, and we were talking about how Kill Team and Warcry actually make more sense as competitive games than the big games do. Now, the big games have more depth at the list building level than Kill Team and Warcry do. I won't dispute any of that. I totally get it. But the fact that you can play 9 games in a weekend pretty reasonably for either of the 2 small games gives you a legit champion. So the Swiss pairing system, when you have exactly enough rounds to get rid of all but 1 undefeated players, it's still not the most legit championship, right? It's if you treat Swiss pairings as single elimination, it's actually just a worse, uglier way of doing single elimination.
Right.
Swiss pairings become really powerful in terms of ranking the players from best to first when you actually have you have enough rounds so that the last undefeated player still has 2 more rounds to go before they've won the tournament. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's when you actually get to sort of tell people who was the best player on that day, who wasn't, etc. And so with Warcry and Kill Team, you can actually do that. 9 rounds over a weekend, that's enough to legitimately say, you went 8-1, nobody else went better than 7-2, and also here's all the points, that they got. And so you can actually really say who is legitimately first, second, and third on a given weekend.
And I know that with 40K, they have expanded, and in fact, Age of Sigmar this year is expanding to where they will have the 5-round normal grand tournament, and then they'll take the top 8 and have them do basically a 3-game playoff, single elimination playoff at the end.
I think that's huge for bragging rights stuff. Yeah, I think it's good. The one thing about only cutting to top 8 is if you just had 3 more rounds of Swiss, the 9th place person could easily still, because again, like the breakers after 5 rounds for who's in top 8 are really just really messy. The 9th place person after 5 rounds can still get 3rd in the tournament if you do 3 more rounds of Swiss. So I do think top 8, I do think cutting to top 8 is really good for at least telling you, who are the 2 best players. But,
right.
If you want to go down any lower than that, I do think continuing Swiss, at least for the top 16, would be better. But I think the cutting to top 8 thing that they're doing, that they've done in 40K for a while, like you said, and that they're starting to do in AOS, I do think that that's a really good step for the people who are interested in it, right? The people who live and breathe the competitive side of that game. I think it's a big step.
So I'm excited about hosting this. I've done conventions before in terms of like an RPG, sessions that I've hosted like at Gen Con and things like that. So I've put on events for complete strangers and things like that. But this is a little bit of a different bear, right? This is actually being the TO for a tournament at a big event like the Nova Open. So
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited to get into it. There's a little there's a little taste of our final segment for the night.
That's right.
So people will hopefully tune in to hear more about that, because I think we both have some ideas, and I'm looking forward to getting into them.
Yeah, definitely. So before we get started, what's on your hobby table, my friend?
I actually just finished 5 squig hoppers. One of them is in the color scheme that I just have for my Gloomspite Gitz warband, but the other 4 are for another YouTube content creator who's planning on doing like a charity video in the summer.
Oh,
and
cool.
I was really excited to be invited to be involved, and looking forward to being able to kind of share more about what that is. But what I can say now is I got to sort of experiment with kind of sky's the limit color schemes on them. And so I always put so much pressure on myself to think of a good color scheme for every warband or every whatever that I do. And it was so freeing to just think, all 4 of these models, the only stipulation is that they be in different color schemes. The sky's the limit for what I can do. Let's just go for it. And it was incredibly freeing. It was completely stress-free. I painted them, pretty fast compared to how I paint most things. And I think it worked out, better than how I paint most things, which I think is really instructive, right? Like, paint freely, paint for fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I put pressure on myself to have something come out a certain way, and it was really a relief to just not care how they came out, and then they ended up coming out great because I was, all the weight was off my shoulders. So it was a good time.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, I'm in the rut's maybe not the right word, but like I'm either painting armies or I'm painting warbands, right? So coming up with a good-looking tabletop cohesive painting scheme, right? Like I haven't really done what you said there, which is like just take a model and just have fun with it. Like I do have fun painting. I love painting. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I think there's something liberating, like you said. In one of our previous Talking Warhammer segments that we had, I had James O'Brien, who was like the Age of Sigmar lead for the Nova Open for all.
I actually
Age of
listened
Sigmar
to
events.
every minute of that podcast.
Oh, did
I
you?
actually
Great.
really liked hearing his perspective. It was really cool.
James is an awesome guy, and I'm lucky that he is in our area here in DC, that I've gamed with him and, gotten to know him. He's a very, very good guy. But we had committed to enter a model in the Capital Palette, which is the painting competition for the upcoming Nova Open. And I think, if I understood our text correctly, you are going to be entering something in there too, right?
Yes. I'm going to enter a... So, Submissions are, the deadline is I think like Saturday at 6, and the AOS event, as long as you don't make top 8, which I don't plan to, it ends at 4. So I'm gonna submit my Yndrasta that I have not painted yet.
Nice.
It's the only part of my Stormcast army that I haven't painted. I've painted the whole thing except for, hilariously, one Castigator and Yndrasta. So at some point this summer, I'm going to paint my one Castigator and Yndrasta and submit the Yndrasta for the painting competition.
So I'm going to take the Ogoroid Myrmidon, and I'm going to paint him up. Yeah. It's just such an amazing model. What I've been kicking around in my mind is having Moonlight come down from the angle where the shield is.
Oh, cool.
And then having some OSL fire light up his kind of underside, where his chest and spear are, right? And then having a base that kind of gives the perception that like a building's on fire or something like that as he's walking through this little town, you know.
That's awesome.
So
that's
the plan. We'll see how I execute. So that's what's shaping up in mind. But recently, I just finished. Last time I think I told you I was still working on the Red Harvest terrain, and that thing was just like, ugh, like just get it done already, right? And I finally finished it, thank goodness, and it looks great. I love it.
Nice.
But then I started on the Dominion half of the Stormcast Eternals just to make that warband up, the Thunder Strike warband. And I snapped a quick pick in our I mean, it's a potato pick that I sent you, but I'm painting them according to like a Roman Legion style.
I was gonna say this looks very historical. That's cool to know. Okay. Yep.
So I painted their shields, like if you know what are they? They're I can't. What are the names of the regular troops with the shields? They're not the Liberators anymore. They're the
Oh, the Vindictors?
Vindictors.
Yeah.
Yep. So these have the classic Stormcast shield, right? I'm going to freehand a little bit of lightning bolts on those.
Cool.
To give that Stormcast look. And I'm going to do that with the blade, too.
Nice. And then you've got kind of the red background that you're going to do on it.
Yeah. So I'm going to leave, like, the red on the shield, like, on the shield, like, do kind of, like reddish magenta lightning bolt type things. And then I'm going to pick out some details with gold on there too, just some of the details. So I want to leave most of the steel armor that I have given them. So, you're going to get a lot of that red, gold, silver, that's kind of associated with Roman Legion style stuff. So it looks really, really good with the guys with the capes and the halberds.
Oh, I bet. Yep.
Looks really
I
good
love
with
the
them.
guys with the capes and halberds. I wish their role in the game is, or at least in AOS, it's good, but it's very niche. And then in Warcry, they're decent, but not amazing. And so it's like in both games, it's something where you can play them if you love them, but you wouldn't go out of your way to play them,
Right.
which is too bad because they're my favorite Thunderstrike model. I like them
amazing.
even more than Annihilators. I also really love Annihilators. But
The shields on the Annihilators are amazing, but they're so slow.
yeah, they are. They are. Also, I love Terminator style, like Space Marine Terminators, that kind of style, but I like them because they complement the smaller ones, Like
Right.
I don't know that I'd want an army of all Terminators, so that's my only thing on the Annihilators. Whereas the Praetors just kind of, they cut that, that flowing, dashing, but then also the really heavy axe at the same time. It's a cool contrast to me.
Yeah. So, this has been a quick and dirty paint job. I mean, obviously, like I said, I'm going to do some freehand a little bit on it.
Yep.
Just to put some lightning bolts in there, and to make it like their shields look a little electrically charged, kind of thing. And then, and then I'm going to base them similarly to the Cruel Boys that I have, which is like the swamp feel, because I want to put them in that same realm with them. So
Nice.
I think it'll be good. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. So yeah, hobby table. It's good. It's good to get back working on models. Like terrain's a nice break every now and then. You know, like especially
Yeah.
after you have like a big project with like maybe either big warband or like an army or something where you're like, I just can't keep painting these little models over and over again.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Terrain's a nice break, but then after a while you're like, okay, I want to get back to models.
And terrain can give you that time to kind of think of your color scheme for the next
Yeah.
set of models, stuff like that. But yeah, it is fun to be actually painting your fighters, painting your people.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like you've accomplished more. You
Yeah,
know,
it
which
does.
is funny because like there's a lot of terrain in that Red Harvest box. So
Yeah.
So that's good. All right. Well, we want to do a faction focus, obviously, similar to what we did with the ogres last time. And we were kicking around the idea of working off of the Daughters of Khaine, which I think is going to be a fun discussion between us.
Yeah,
And
they're in the news right now.
yes, they are. Yes, they are. I'm a Night Hunt player, by the way, in Age of Sigmar. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know it until I listened to your podcast where you talked about
Yeah.
them. So are you excited?
This Arena of Shades doesn't do it for me, to be honest with you.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I mean, and part of it is like I've got most of the models already. Like I've got like 12 or 16 Banshees already,
Uh-huh.
and you don't need that many Banshees. Like I just somehow ended up with that many Banshees. And then like I've got a bunch of the Bladegeist Revenants already. And so like getting the new box set for Age of Sigmar would be getting the 5 crossbowmen and then the new scripter character. And I'll probably wait for the crossbowmen to come out in their own separate box and kind of see how they are. Like I'm a little dubious on how well of shooting they are. But the scripter I'll just like find them off of eBay or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be my best bet.
So let me try to sell you on them. I know we said we do Daughters of Khaine, but it makes sense to kind of talk about them in relation to Night Haunt since they're coming out at the same time.
Yeah.
Let me sell you on. So the Knight of Shrouds and the Dreadblade Harrow in
Yes.
Warcry, not AOS, in Warcry, both of them are quite good. They're fighters
amazing.
that,
Yes.
if they belonged to other factions that are better than Night Haunt, you know, as far as like the ground and pound troops, if they belonged to other factions, people would talk about the Knight of Shrouds on Steed and the Dreadblade Harrow as being like, you know, some of the really scary, like you watch out for those guys kinds of fighters.
Absolutely. When they came out with the new rules for the night that include, so you know, the original Night Haunt Warband only had like Chain Rasps and the Spirit Torment and they're the Reapers, and
Yep.
there just wasn't that much in there, right? And so when they expanded it with the Grand Alliance book, that Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed was a winner. Oh my goodness. Like, he
Absolutely.
is amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, and then, so between that and the Dreadblade Harrow, imagine a warband, right, where, so you've got your Mirmorn Banshee, which is a decent fighter, but is kind of expensive, and it's in that kind of place at 145 points. That's kind of no man's land or no ghost's land as far as kind of their value in the game. Imagine just the two big scary flyers just backed up with archers. Just archers.
Okay.
You know, like you basically you run in with your two big scary flyers, or not necessarily charge right away, but just like you go do what needs to be done for the mission with your big scary flyers. And then your archers are just there picking off anyone that the flyers leave on 1 or 2 health.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, maybe you have room for a chain rasp or 2, but I think that having 3 crossbows in Warcry might, depending on if they're any good, which, you know, they could really go any direction. Most archers are at least okay. It could kind of give Night Haunt a new identity in the game. You know, depending on what it looks like there. So it could be exciting for them.
For sure. I really do want to touch. So maybe our next podcast we'll talk about Night Hunt, because I think that there's some interesting options now. I know that like they kind of hit like a wet noodle, and they do the same thing in Age of Sigmar. But there's some interesting options now They aren't your mother's Night Hunt warband that first came out with the.
Yeah, they were kind of
first
celebrated
release.
as being one of the worst in the game, and now, the TOC, I still think they're not burning down the doors of competitive play, but I do think that they're very playable now in
Yeah.
a way that they weren't before.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And maybe we'll get some rules for the crossbowmen and stuff like that, and that'll help us make an opinion in our next episode.
Yeah, that would be really cool. That would be
That'd be
cool.
great. But let's talk about Daughters of Khaine. So, a little bit of flavor background, right? Why are these guys, why are these ladies, I should say that, right? Why are these ladies in the 8 points? Basically, Morathi is sending these ladies, these slaughter queens and these witch elves and sisters of slaughter and, snake ladies, and they're just going out and looking for some of that Varanite. Now, they weren't doing some of the special ops that the Khainite Shadowstalkers were doing, but, they're there to back them up, and they love killing things, right? So they were out looking for just warbands to cut down and help support the Khainite Shadowstalkers when they needed. So,
And some really cool stuff in the blurb in the Grand Alliance book about how a bunch of Sisters of Slaughter have just kind of made a home in Karngrad, and
Yeah.
it's like, because I've always thought that Doc is kind of a secret Khorne army, anyway, that just kind of is in order, but really, I mean, they're empowering Khorne quite a bit. There's always like little things about how Khorne kind of likes Khaine or has always liked Khaine.
right.
And so there's a blurb in the Grand Alliance Order thing about a lot of Daughters of Khaine just kind of living in Karngrad and figuring every day I fight in the fighting pits and I slaughter chaos worshippers, so I am being productive here for Order.
Right,
but,
exactly.
But really that's just an excuse, because for all intents and purposes they're just living the chaos life in Karngrad, but just as gladiators,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, what I think is interesting is that for this warband, their fluff meets their warband style quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
Which is, you've got a bunch of half-naked she-elves running around with knives and bloodlust. And that's how they play, right?
Yep.
They run around and they just slice and dice things up. So it can be a lot of fun for anyone to play this, especially if you've got the army or the new box out, right? Like, they've got a lot of good options in the new box set that came out.
Yeah, they really do. And let's get into it. Let's start, I think, with the kind of backbone troops. Daughters of Khaine have a ton of cool leaders to talk about, but I think any kind of Daughters of Khaine warband, it's going to start with probably, not always, so we'll talk about more options, but you're probably going to start with deciding, some sort of mix of witch elves or Sisters of Slaughter to be your sort of the backbone of your warband.
Yeah.
And they're a little expensive to collect, right? That Witch Elf Sisters of Slaughter box has always been one of the more expensive, small battle line boxes. But
it's really pricey. It was like $60, and this is before the price increases. It was like $60 for 20 of them, right?
I think $60 for 10. 60 for 10.
60 for 10. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot. That's a lot. So.
Luckily, with the price increases that have hit most armies, they actually didn't hit the Witch Elf box.
Right.
So, they haven't gone up. They started as one of the most expensive things, but they haven't been going up where everything else has been going up. So at least, they're not quite as far out there comparatively anymore. But to get to how they actually play in Warcry, right, we've got the Sisters of Slaughter and the Witch Elves both have 2 options, so 4 options total. One is with a shield, so you can have the Sister of Slaughter with a whip and a shield, or you can have the Witch Elf with a knife and a shield.
Yeah.
Or you can do Sister of Slaughter with whip and a knife, or Witch Elf with 2 knives.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've got the stats in front of them. I would probably tell people to stay away from the shields myself. You do get that +1 toughness, but you're paying a pretty significant premium for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, first off, it's 10 extra points, right, for either one of them to take the shield. You get the extra toughness, but you also lose an attack, right?
Yeah, you do. That's true.
That is, I think that's more significant for the Witch Elves, just because they're fishing for criticals, especially since they only have a 1-inch ranged attack. So, the Witch Elves want to get up in your face and do as much damage as they can before they get hit back, because they're only toughness 3 and 8 wounds, right? So, something a little bit bigger can totally delete them if they get a double attack on them.
Yeah, that's true. And if they were the same points cost, we could at least think about it.
Right.
As far as whether that toughness is worth the 1 less attack, but at being more points for the shields, I would just tell people to stay away. Now, the point you made about needing to get their damage in before they get obliterated, it's definitely true. Witch Elves, so that the 8 hit points, Witch Elves are so cheap at 65 points that you can field enough of them that the 8 points doesn't feel backbreaking if you've just got a ton of them on the board, right? If you're Witch Elves everywhere, and it's like, some fighters can take things with 8 hit points out efficiently, but some can't. Sisters of Slaughter, though, have that 2-inch range. I think is really helpful for them because
super helpful.
They do a lot of damage. I always think 2-inch range is better when you do a lot of damage, and then they can also keep out of danger sometimes.
Yeah, so what's interesting is, your basic Witch Elf with the 2 knives is 65 points. So you can pack in a lot of Witch Elves in a list, right? I mean, you're looking at easily like 5, 6, 7 Witch Elves if you wanted to go that route. Very easily.
You could easily.
And then, with the Sister of Slaughter, it's equivalent, which has the knife and the whip. It's only 10 more points, and I think that's interesting because it has pretty much the same attack profile, meaning that it has 4 attacks, it's strength 3. The difference is that it has a 2-inch range, and its base damage is the same, but its critical is 1 more point at 4 points. So you're actually, with 4 attacks, you're kind of fishing for crits a little bit. You're hoping to get those crits out.
Yep.
At least one of them. And so to do 1 extra point of damage and have that 2-inch range for only 10 more points, I think is almost a no-brainer for that, in my opinion.
I would agree. I think Sisters of Slaughter are just one of the better chaff options out there. I mean, they're not quite chaff. Like 75 points is a little investment, but I do think I agree with you that they're a little bit better than the Witch Elves. And it's funny, I think a lot of factions in the game would kill to have Witch Elves, right? If they were, Daughters of Khaine, Witch Elves are their second best cheap fighter. Half the factions in the game would be like, yes, we'll throw out all our cheap fighters if you'll just give us Witch Elves. So you're spoiled for choice with Daughters of Khaine, but I do agree. I would start by putting Sisters of Slaughter in my list. And then I usually have a couple Witch Elves when I make lists with them because the math usually works out better that way, right? Just not any kind of math hammer, but I just mean like the list building addition.
Right, like you find yourself at 1,005 points, right? And you're like,
right,
okay,
and so you're like, all right, I'll drop a Sister of Slaughter for a Witch Elf here. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I'm glad you also agree on the Sisters of Slaughter being, you get enough for that extra 10 points that I absolutely think it's worth it.
Yeah. What? All right. So we have 2. There's some interesting choices. We have 2 Snake Ladies, right? One's a Blood Sister, that's your melee option, and one's a Blood Stalker, that's your ranged option. How do you like these 2?
So I've been thinking about them a lot, and it's tough to say. So I actually just bought the Daughters of Khaine Warcry box. I'm looking forward to painting them up. I think Blood Sisters are good. They're not. This is the spear ones.
Yep.
They're not really incredible now that they've taken a bit of a points nerf, but I do think they're good. 7-inch range in terms of movement is solid, and they've got that 2-inch range. And normally we think of Daughters of Khaine as being made of glass, like dies so easily. The snake ladies don't die easily.
Right.
They've kind of got some toughness to them. I don't just mean in terms of their literal toughness being 4, being a little higher, but they've got a decent wounds characteristic at 20, right? Like they can take hits from some of the more elite fighters in the game and still hit them back, which I think is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because I'm looking at this, and let's compare this Blood Sister that's 100 and... Well, the book says 165. What'd they move up to? 170?
They only went up to 170, so
170,
a small nerf. Yeah, 5-point nerf.
So they're at 170 now, and you've got the Sisters of Slaughter at 75 points, right? So you can get 2 Sisters of Slaughter for 1 Blood Sister, essentially. Less than 1 Blood Sister. Now, they both have a 2-inch attack. The Blood Sister only has 1 more attack. They have the same toughness, same wound profile. So that's interesting to me, right? Obviously, the Blood Sister has a little bit more toughness, a little bit more movement, a little bit more wounds. But if you are looking to make a killy army, like one that's going to delete things off the board, I would rather go with the 2 Sisters of Slaughter than 1 Blood Sister.
I think I agree. The only time I would sort of question that is if you know your opponent is playing, say, a lot of shooting where they're, like when you throw your Blood Sisters or your Sisters of Slaughter across the table, probably only one of them is going to survive to get to the other side. Whereas your Blood Sister, probably even just one of them is going to make it, and then because of that 7-inch move as well. Right. And then you'll have the entire profile to attack with, as opposed to, it's only 1 more attack, but you'll have that extra beef a little bit to attack with. So I think that there are opposing warbands that can make you wish you had the Blood Sisters over the Sisters of Slaughter. I think that extra 2-inch move is very relevant in certain situations. But I would say, 80% of the time, I think I agree with you that I'd rather have the 2 Sisters of Slaughter than the Blood Sister.
Definitely. If I were going into a tournament blind, right, like not knowing what I was going to face, I mean, even if I knew what lists were there, I just don't know what I'm going to face, I would probably include a Blood Sister. Just because you just don't, you know what I mean? You may need that little bit of extra beefiness, and you can't count on just yeeting up these these Sisters of Slaughter up the board and have them go killy.
Because you don't know if your opponents will be bringing things that can really kill them efficiently before they get their attacks in.
Right, exactly. What do you think about the Bloodstalker, the Archer version?
I like. There's a lot to like there. I like having archers in general. I don't love this one. Just because the damage output feels disappointing for how many points you're investing there.
Yeah, did she go up to 170?
Yeah, she went up to 175 actually.
Ooh. Yeah. I don't think she needed that. Because here's the thing. She does have a 20-inch range on her bow, which is, reach out and touch somebody, right?
Yep.
The only problem, though, is you've got 2 shots. Like, that's pretty swingy.
You whiff a lot. Yeah.
And it's 2 shots at strength 3. So, like, you're going up against a toughness 4 opponent, which they're around. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, you're hitting on 5s and 6s, so you're really hoping for crits with only 2 dice. So, this could be this is a model that if you would almost put in the rear with a gear to hold down an objective and hope that they can just like rain arrows down on something, But you're also paying for her toughness and her wound count as well, and her movement. So it's like, well, what does she want to be? Does she want to be someone that shoots across the board? Because she's going to whiff a lot of times, or does she want to be someone that gets up in the action? And if she wants to be someone that gets up in the action, why not just take a Blood Sister?
Yeah, agreed. I think short range with a lot of speed can be really useful, right? It's like you use the speed to get to the objective, and then you're shooting from one side of the objective to the other, so, etc. But fast with really long range, I feel like, yes, it means nothing can hide from you ever, so that's good in treasure missions. But outside of treasure missions, I don't think it's very good.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to talking about the leaders, because I do like having access to archers in your warband, but this one's not it, and I think you've got other options.
All right, so let's round out some of these units real quick. Doomfire Warlock. Would you ever take a Doomfire Warlock?
I am allergic to mounts.
Me too.
Of course, with the exception of catacombs, right? Of course, catacombs are good.
You did mention that before.
Mounts are good there, but the Doomfire Warlock has the same problem you talked about with the Bloodstalker, right? Just 2 attacks, strength 3. You're just whiffing so often, and 140 points is a lot. Or, wow, they're 145 now post Toma Champions. That's a lot of points.
They should have made it 75 points, and still I would have thought twice about taking it. Like, it's just not my favorite. You're just like, I want to do something with this model, but they're just like, you can't climb on things. You can't, you can't go through doors. You can't, like, do much with amount. I mean, you can get from point A to point B quick.
Yep.
But it has toughness 3, 18 wounds. Like, a couple of good attacks. Like, man, if an Ogre Leadbelcher targeted this guy, he'd be dead. Mm-hmm. Real fast, so I mean, but
there's too many drawbacks to justify. You do get that long range, right? 10-inch move, but we have better options with this warband.
The last two that we have in here is the Khaine Heartrender and the Khaine Life Taker, which are both kind of the big winged flyers. Interestingly, I think the wings look a lot like the Furies. Right,
they do.
In the Chaos Beast. So I think that's where they got a lot of those. But anyway, so you've got the flyers here. Do either of these stand out for you?
I almost never try to dismiss a fighter for being too fragile, because I think that you can often get a lot of value. But man, after they took points hikes, it's 180 points now for a Khaine Heartrender. It's 170 for a Life Taker, and only 10 wounds. I mean, I know you have toughness 4 there, but only 10 wounds for that many points it's just asking for something to go wrong.
I mean, they've got amazing movement at 12 inches, right?
That's true.
Like, they can get anywhere on the board with a double move, anywhere they want to be. But, and this is a huge but, you throw them up the board, and then what? You know what I mean? Like, are they sitting ducks? Like, they can easily outrun their support. Not that you have a ton of support in Warcry, but if they're the only target that's within range of all the other fighters, they're gonna take it in the chin, hard.
And this is another one where I'm excited to talk about their leaders, because if you're gonna invest that many points into something that's just gonna die, well, let's talk about their leaders that aren't gonna die. Right, and I think we are to the leaders now.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So let's back up a little bit with the leaders. What are your favorite choices here on leaders?
They've got a lot of good ones.
They do. They have a lot.
I guess
maybe should we start with ones that you wouldn't take?
Sure, just to eliminate them real quick. I would only take the Witch Elf Hag if I'm just trying to clear a lot of points out in my list. Same is true. The Hag Queen has kind of an interesting ability, but she's so bad at fighting, I wouldn't take her, because you have lots of other great abilities too, so you don't really need her ability. And then the Handmaiden, it's double the points, almost double the points of 2 Sisters of Slaughter. It's basically you stapled 2 of them together, except without as much of an output increase. So I just wouldn't. Sorry, the Handmaiden is the Sister of Slaughter leader. I wouldn't play the Handmaiden unless I was just like really in love with Sisters of Slaughter and wanted to have an all SOS warband.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. I think the Handmaiden, the Hag Queen, and the Witch Elf Hag, which again, that Witch Elf Hag is the leader of the, Witch Elves, kind of their sergeant in the out of the box coming out. Those three. You just look at the points and you're like, what am I getting for the extra points that I can't get from the normal one? Sure, they've got a little bit of access to some of the leader abilities, but let's invest the points where I think they do more good.
Yeah.
So let's start with now that we've kind of eliminated those, which ones do you really like?
I love the Bloodrack Medusa.
Okay.
I think it is one of the best leaders in the whole game. Probably not top 5, but definitely top 10.
Okay.
It is so first off, it does a pretty good job dealing damage. It, especially to toughness 3 things, it totally wrecks toughness 3, right? Because it deals 3 damage on non-crits.
Yeah.
So, of course, if you do get a 6, you deal 5, and that's great. But having strength 4 and then 3 damage on non-crits, and with 4 attacks too, I mean, any kind of chaff model, you completely just blow it off the board. So one of the things, it's one of the things that's important in this game is being able to clear chaff, and the Bloodrack Medusa does it very well. The other thing, though, is it's also very good against super elites, so really big things. It doesn't do a lot of damage to them, right? Because, again, anything with strength 4 is going to struggle against toughness 5. But you have the Bloodrack Stare.
Yeah,
so
this is an amazing ability.
It's incredible. So you roll 2 dice. If either is a 3-up, which I think goes to 88% of just getting at least one 3 or better with 2 dice.
Yeah.
Until the end of the battle round, that fighter cannot make moves or disengages. In addition, for each 6, you get to do some damage to them, which is it's a cool bonus, but it's not the reason you're taking the ability. It does make it really good, though, and when you do get a 6, your opponent's just going to have a bit of a facepalm moment. But, so net abilities are always good, right?
For sure. Imagine using this on a tyrant.
Yep.
That's going to charge into one of your units that's maybe got the treasure or something like that, and you just fix him in place, and now he can't move.
Yeah, which
that's
is wonderful.
amazing.
And then it combos with the fact that the Bloodrack Medusa has range 2.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do this on any range 1 fighter, and they'll be stuck. So you can just have your Bloodrack Medusa attacking them. They can't attack you back, and they can't move.
Right.
Right? It's just completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
It's a really, really strong ability and really strong fighter.
And she's pretty beefy. I mean, she's got a toughness of 4 and 35 wounds.
Yep.
Which is, that's a good amount of wounds, especially if you're looking at your chaff that's 8 wounds, which is pretty typical, right?
Yep.
But 35 wounds she'll be on the board for the whole game if you treat her right.
And she started at 255. Now she's only 250. She is worth every single point of that. She was worth it at 255. I don't know why they dropped her 5 points. But maybe I do know. So the Contorted Epitome is kind of the Slanesh version of the Bloodrack Medusa, and it is a little stronger. And it was 250 and is now 255. So maybe they just looked at those two leaders and just said, let's just flip these. I don't know. But it's still one of the best leaders in the game, and it's amazing. Yeah,
if I'm a Daughters of Khaine player and I saw that they took off 5 points off the Bloodrack Medusa and gave 5 points to the Doomlock or Doomfire Warlock, I'm not mad about that. Like, pile all the points on that one. I'm not taking that one anyway, right? Like,
Right. I wasn't a buyer at 135. I'm not a buyer at 145. Make it 175 if you have to. Yep. But they've actually got pretty solid options once you get past the Blood Rack as well. What's your favorite after the Blood Rack?
My favorite after the Blood Rack has to be the Master of Warlocks.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, I was going to say, like, wow, that is a surprise. Okay, tell me more.
No. He's probably on my lowest list of things.
Yeah,
here.
I think
like
so.
we didn't talk about him with the Witch Elf Hag, right? But,
he was so bad that we forgot him with the other bad ones.
Exactly. We're trying to strike him out of our memory. No, I like the Gorgai a lot. The Gorgai is beefy.
I like the Gorgai a lot,
right?
too.
So she's 245 points. Sorry, I don't have the errata in front of me.
5-point buff as well, so she's 240 now.
So she's 240. Oh my gosh. So all right. So this is the the leader version of the Bloodstalker, which is your melee snake lady, right?
Yep.
And so she's got obviously the 2-inch range on her spear, but she's got a whopping 6 attacks that she comes in with strength 4, base damage of 2, 4 on her crit. So with 6 attacks, you're fishing for some crits there, right?
Yep.
You're looking to get that. And she has the Turn to Crystal ability, which is it's okay. Like I think all of the Medusa snake ladies have that, right? Which does some damage if you roll a dice and get a 4 to 5, and on a 6 you do extra, which is fine.
Other factions have better versions of that ability, right?
Yeah.
And because they're good, they don't do a lot of output, but they're good for finishing off fighters that you've left on 1 or 2 wounds. But this one has a decent chance of whiffing, which I think is a little disappointing, but it's fine. It's whatever.
So, and one thing I want to point out is that all of the leaders have the Sacrifice to Khaine ability, which is if you take down a fighter during that activation, you can use this ability, and until the end of the battle round, it adds 1 to the attack's characteristic of your attack actions. They have a
really
range
solid.
of 3 or less. So, especially if, sometimes you pull out a triple hoping to use it somewhere, and then it ends up not working out. Like, the fact that all of your leaders can now use that, that's a really solid option to be able to be like, okay, well, I'm going to use it on the Blood Rack Medusa. Oh, wait, that person died. So let me use it on the Gorgai. You know what I mean? And the
Gorgai, to your point, the Gorgai and the Blood Rack are so good with that ability because they have that 7-inch move, and then they do a lot of damage. So a lot of the time you have the ability, right, because you have to get a kill to proc this, but you a lot of the time have the ability, especially with the range 2, to kind of cross the board, find a soft target, kill it, and then be in a place where you're going to have a big fight elsewhere too, or nearby, which I think is really good.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really interested in the Shrike and the Harridan leaders, and I think we talked about those a little bit, right?
Or we just mentioned them when we talked
them,
about the Khaine. Yeah, let's talk about the Shrike and Harridan. I'm interested in them too.
So this is kind of one of those where you have taken the two of the Khaine Heartrenders or life takers, and you've mushed them into one. And I think it solves a big problem that the Khaine ones have, which is that they're only 10 wounds. So now these are now 20 wounds, and they have a little bit better damage output. Their base damage is 2. They keep the crit at 4. But otherwise, they've got the same attack, or they got 1 extra attack each as well. So I feel like they've made up for a big weakness of the regular troops there.
Yeah, I think the Shrike especially, I just think it does everything that you want the Life Taker to do, but it doesn't do. The Shrike actually does it, and it's only 70 points more, so it's hefty, right? You can get an entire Witch Elf for that price, but having the extra sort of insurance there, being able to before, yes, a life taker, move 12, range 8, 20 inches across the board, you can hit something.
Yeah.
The output is so low on those that you're not really doing anything. Now with the Shrike, literally nothing can escape from you. Yes, you don't do a lot of damage to toughness 5 because you're strength 4, but both, toughness 4 and 3, the Shrike actually does a lot of damage to toughness 4 and 3,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And they have the access to. They're the only ones that have access. Them and the regular troops, right? The Kinares. They have the only access to the quad of the normal fighters, which is actually a really amazing quad. And I know you don't like building your list around quads, and I understand why. But if you're gonna take these anyway, having that quad is amazing because what it does is it's called Death on the Wind. And if you can use the ability, this fighter makes a bonus move action, then they can make a bonus attack action, right? So you get a move and attack. In addition, add 1 to the strength characteristic of that attack action if the fighter finished the move action 6 or more inches from their starting position. Now, these guys have a movement of 12.
Yeah.
So a bonus move action will get them across the board. It can go pretty much anywhere where it wants to go, and then gets to attack again, and add to their strength. So all of a sudden they're now strength 5, right?
Which can be relevant against a lot of targets, right? The move from 4 to 5 isn't bad on strength, and like you said, it's always gonna result in 3 attack actions pretty much, and getting to kind of boost your output on those attacks is really nice. I like it when a quad is just a better version of Rampage.
Right.
Because normally
that's definitely the measuring stick.
Yeah, I think most quads are just worse than Rampage, and I would just Rampage instead. But when it's just a slightly improved Rampage, it's nice. And I think both of these leaders are really solid. And if you bought some Canary and you are disappointed that they're not very good, well, at least your leader is really solid. And flyers are good in Warcry, especially with the newest missions in Red Harvest and the Tome of Champions. Having a flyer can be really helpful, and both of these I think are worthwhile, at least for testing.
So there's one. The Crone is the leader version of the bow snake lady. I don't know that I'm in love with her. I think she's got similar problems, right? She's got 3 attacks with her bow, which make her a little less swingy, but you're still gonna whiff a lot. I don't know if she's worth the points to me.
Yeah, I think that she solves some of the problems, but I'm not sure. Crone versus Shrike, I would lean toward the Shrike being the ranged flyer leader.
Yeah.
As far as your, the ability to have an archer that covers the whole board and has legitimate output, I might lean towards the Shrike for that. And they're so close in points. The Crone is 235. The Shrike is only 240, so it's only 5 more points. The output is kind of similar, but I think the Shrike whiffs less. I'm not 100% sure on that, but...
it's probably right, because, you got toughness 4 instead of toughness 3.
They're both...
Attacks, right?
Okay. They're both on 3 attacks, right? So...
Yeah.
But, the Shrike whiffs less on small things. And I think that's really, really good. I think... the Crone is nice if you find yourself up against Stormcast, maybe, being able to kind of do the same damage to them that they do to a lot of things. But I think Daughters of Khaine are already pretty good against Stormcast.
Yeah. The last leader that we have not talked about is the Slaughter Queen. And the interesting thing is that... she has the access to the only quad ability for the leaders, right? She's the only one that has it. And basically, it says until the end of the battle round, add half the value of this ability, rounding up, to the damage points allocated to enemy fighters by each hit and critical hit from attack and actions that have a range characteristic of 3 or less. made by friendly fighters while they're within 8 inches of this fire. So as long as you can keep her around, I mean, like, she would be I think she would be great if she was, like, hanging kind of around a bunch of Sisters of Slaughter,
Yep.
and you get to add, half the ability. Here's the problem with that, though. One, it's a quad, right? You got to get that quad. Two, it's half the value of the ability. So even at a 6, you're adding, which is your top amount, or a 5 or a 6, you're getting 3. So yeah, I mean, 3 points. Adding that to an ability is quite a bit. But what if you end up with a quad at a 2? You're adding 1 point per attack.
And with quads, you don't have control over what the value is the way you do with triples, right? Triples, you might roll 2 doubles, and you add your wild dice to the bigger double, and you have some control over the size of your triple. You don't have any control over how big your quads are. You roll a quad, and you celebrate, but you don't really get to control how big the quad is. So I am a little put off by that. Also, Sacrifice to Khaine. I know it's much worse, but it is doing a pretty similar thing to what Orgy of Slaughter is doing.
Right.
So I don't feel like you need it. I know some people are high on the Slaughter Queen because it does kill chaff really effectively, right? 5 attacks, strength 4, 2/4 damage. That does average out to be, on the average roll, you kill an 8 wound, toughness 3 chaff fighter. But I don't know that a Slaughter Queen plus a Sister of Slaughter is more interesting to me than some of these bigger, beefier heroes that, the whole game just revolves around them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the Gore Guy, the Bloodrack Medusa, even the Shrike, right? Like you can make the entire match revolve around your big hero character. And I'm skeptical of the Slaughter Queen. I know some people like it, but I'm skeptical of it.
I think that's fair. I think it's fair, and I think if that fits into your style of play, it's not a terrible option. I think that the Slaughter Queen falls into the middle options, right? Which is kind of 100%. Where we ended with her, right? She's not the Doomfire Warlock leader that we forgot to talk about because it's just not worth talking about. Right?
100%. If my opponent has a Slaughter Queen, I'm still thinking in my head oh man, what am I going to do about that Slaughter Queen? It's not bad by any means. You can definitely win with a Slaughter Queen. The other one that's in the middle, I think that we didn't mention, is the Melusai Iron Scale.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's the one that came in their sort of their dual box against Slanesh. That's it's kind of a cross between a Crone and a Gorgai, where it does decent melee damage, but not as good as the Gorgai. It has a ranged attack, but the ranged attack is a little worse than the Crone's. It's the kind of thing that I think is really good in narrative. It's 265 points, so it's a little more expensive than the others. But the reason I think it's good in narrative is once you slap a couple artifacts on your hero, having them be able to fill a lot of different roles in narrative gaming can be really nice. I know a lot of narrative gamers are just no, you should be telling the coolest story. But I at least, when I play narratively, I do think about at least some amount of utility in the game. I think most people do. And I think that an Iron Scale with a few artifacts on it is actually really good, whereas in matched play, it doesn't do what the Gorgai does as well as the Gorgai does it. It doesn't do what the Crone does as well as the Crone does it. It's kind of stuck in the middle. But for narrative play, I think it's solid.
What's interesting is I think you find that with a lot of warbands, right? The Icebrow Hunter in the Ogres is in a similar spot, right? It's not as good as a Glutton, or what is it, the Iron Belly?
Yep.
The Iron Belly? Yeah. It's not as good as one of those melee, and it's not as good as the Lead Belcher melee or ranged attack. And it's kind of mediocre at both, but it can do both.
Right.
So you have to. I think you have to balance that. Like, what do you want? Do you want it to be kind of okay at both, just so you have the options, or are you trying to do something where you have ranged, and should you just go with the ranged one?
Yeah,
I think that you have to ask yourself that.
And I think usually you're going to want it to at least do one of the roles very well. Like the Tyrant, right, in Ogres. The Tyrant does one roll very well, and so the fact that it has a ranged attack is just kind of gravy on the side.
Yeah, definitely.
And so this doesn't quite have that, which is why I say narrative, because once you put an artifact on it, it is doing one roll very well, and then the other thing is gravy on the side, right? So, but you need an artifact to kind of pump it up. We also missed Morgweth's Blade Coven. That's the Underworld's warband.
Yes.
Not quite as strong as their... They're a lot more points than their equivalents. They're all of the Sisters of Slaughter and Witch Elves are all 95 points. So, and then even Morgweth's sort of pump ability is not quite as strong as a Sister of Slaughter doing just their regular, their regular pump. So I would stay away from the Blade Coven for competitive play, but man, are those cool poses and cool
There's some
models,
amazing models.
And yeah.
Yeah, they're just not there for me. And like you said, the Witch Elf, you can get a Witch Elf for 30 points cheaper than what they're selling their Witch Elf here for, essentially.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I'm not a buyer. They are apparently decent in AOS, so maybe that's why they gave them pretty weak Warcry rules, is because, they thought, like, if you're buying them, you're playing them in two systems anyway, Underworlds and AOS, so let's focus our really strong rules on maybe some of the ones that are not very good in AOS. I don't know what they were thinking, but yeah, who knows. So hit me with some lists. How would you build a list here?
So I'm going to make a shameless plug here. We have been working on some of the Warcry faction pages on our Tabletop and Beyond website. So if you want to take a look at kind of our evaluation of some of these units and leaders and sort of the strengths and weaknesses of the armies, the strategy that you can be using, we've got, I feel like it's a pretty good breakdown on our webpage. And I'm pulling from my sample list that I put at the bottom of the page here. So I'm going with a leader is the Gorgai, okay? And I decided to go with a Bloodstalker and a Blood Sister. I did decide to go with a Blood Sister on here, because I did like the idea of the double attack archer from pretty much anywhere on the board, right?
Yeah.
That was pretty good. I went with a Life Taker. I should probably change this list after our discussion, but I did go with the Life Taker.
And you were even leading the train on Life Takers being disappointing.
I know I was. Oh, man, I made this list before the show, so maybe I need to go update it. But I did go with a Life Taker. The idea would, that's kind of like a run and grab, like if there's a treasure mission type of thing.
Yep.
And then I've got 3 Sisters of Slaughter with the two Sisters of Slaughter with the barbed whip and sacrificial knife.
Yep.
And then 1 with the bladed buckler, and I did that just for points because I'm at 990 at that point.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, what I would do, I would go with the Bloodrack Medusa is where I would start, and then you can really try a Gorgai or a Shrike. The Gorgai being the leader of the Snake Lady Spear people, and the Shrike being the leader of the sort of
Kinerai
Batwing.
Heartrenders.
Yeah, the Kinerai with the spears. Yep. I think both of them are very good. I would want to test both. I only have a Gorgai, so that's what I'm going to be using. But yeah, so a Bloodrack Medusa, a Gorgai, 2 Witch Elves with 2 knives, and 5 Sisters of Slaughter with the whip and the knife.
Ooh.
And so
that sounds like a pretty deadly list, man.
So it's 9 fighters. So you're not exactly flooding the board, but you've got 2 huge threats where the game kind of revolves around your 2 threats, and then your sort of cheap fighters are really solid. So that's where I would start. But this this list leaves a bunch of pretty solid fighters on the sidelines. So I think that there's a lot to experiment with Daughters of Khaine.
It was funny. My initial impressions of Daughters of Khaine as I was going through it, I too have the box, and I have not yet cracked it open to build it. I'm really excited to do it. But my first impression when I was looking at their stats, looking at their abilities, I'm like, ooh, this is glass cannon army, and like they've got light toughness, and sure they can do some damage and up it with abilities, but I wasn't too high on them. But then as we were talking and kind of going through it, before as we were working on the page, I was like, wow, this is actually a really decent warband. Like, there's a lot of options here. You can do a lot of damage. You can move really well. It's definitely an army where you want to pick your battles. If you've got a lot of
Agreed.
Sisters
Yep.
of Slaughter or Witch Elves, like, you want to pick your battles. You don't want to just kind of charge in like you would with the ogres.
Agreed.
Right, like you want to make sure that you are playing a game that you're dictating the battlefield. But if you can do that, ooh, it's powerful.
And be smart about your 2-inch range, right? You've got 2-inch range all up and down the army, so that really relies on you to position well. If you just charge in, it is glass cannon if you just charge in. But if you kind of use your abilities and your positioning and you play smart, it's this interesting, it's a little bit of finesse, but it is also just like scream across the table and kill everything, but kill everything in a fancy way,
Which is super fluff with these guys.
It
right?
actually, it really is. Yeah, agreed.
Really is. So I think we're both pretty high on Daughters of Khaine in terms of being a pretty competitive army. And look, if you're looking to just play narrative, again, the fluff matches that well. So
Yeah.
I don't think you can go wrong with this warband.
Same.
So awesome. Very good. If you guys have any questions about how we got to some of our stuff, hopefully we covered it pretty well. But if you've got questions, like, leave it in. We've got our Facebook page. We have a Twitter, Tabletop and Beyond. Our Facebook page, at either one, you can leave it there. We're also in the Warcry Discord chat. So if you want to tag either one of us, you've obviously got the Salty Sea, and I'm Justin O. Smith 1-2. Super super interesting name. They're in the Discord chat, but if you want to hear any of that, like, feel free to tag us in the Discord. We'd love to chat with you guys about this. But let's talk about let's see how much time we have. We've got about 25 minutes, which is probably a perfect amount of time for our next segment. Let's talk about your time. Well, the main topic that we want to talk about today is events, right? And this is stemming off the fact that you went to Adepticon, and that we are looking forward to the Nova Open that's going to be happening here in a couple of months. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about your time at Adepticon? And I would dare to say that Adepticon was the first major Warcry event in North America.
Yes, I would say so. They've had some events in Poland. They've had some events in New Zealand, but I hadn't heard much about, just very, very few events in North America. It was really cool. I met a ton of people, who I'd never met before, who were just really into the game. It was really cool to see, because I interact a lot with people who post about the game online, right?
Yeah.
Or people who comment on my videos, stuff like that. But most people who watch my videos don't comment, right? And most people who play the game don't go online to talk about the game.
Right.
But a lot of those people, and again, most people also don't go to tournaments, but a lot of the people who don't talk online or don't post anywhere, they do go to these tournaments. And so there were in the mid-20s of people at a narrative event that was incredible. It was really well run. I just put up a video talking with the organizers about it, about sort of their philosophy behind creating the event. And then there were also 20-something people at, between the two competitive events. And and it was really cool to see kind of people's excitement for the game, the things that bring people together into the game. I think talking to people, a lot of people were really into the fact that you could play Underworlds in Warcry now. a lot of people who had bought the Underworld's warbands but then been disappointed by that game and being really excited that you could play it in Warcry. And a lot of people who actually came to the game for one of the two reasons I did. Both of my reasons for being in the game. The first one being that it's sort of more accessible from a hobby perspective. You can kind of try a wider breadth of things and you can experiment more. And my other one being that it just flows quickly and is fun, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of people I talked with were just like, yeah, I mean, I just played 4 rounds today and I feel great. Every round was fun and had its own personality and it went quickly. And 4 rounds of Warcry is what is that? It's 5 hours of playing, right? Because each round is an hour and 15 minutes. And, contrast that with 2.5 hour rounds in one of the big games, play 3 rounds in a day. That's 7.5 hours of playing.
Spent. You are spent.
You are completely spent. And I do think if you tried to push Warcry to 5 rounds, right, you could fit it in a day, but you would probably be spent. You would be just as exhausted after 5 rounds. But after 4, everyone was having a great time. I kind of made some friends and went out after both the narrative event and then also the second competitive event. People still had energy to do so, which I thought was great, right? So all of that was really fun. Just really glad I went, and it was so nice after, starting my channel in the pandemic and starting playing in the pandemic to finally get playing with people in person at a large event was really cool.
Now, you've got two videos about Adepticon, or 3?
3 now, but
3 now, okay.
two that are actually kind of nuts and bolts about what was there.
Mm-hmm.
So
I encourage everybody to go check out the Salty Seas podcast or YouTube channel for really the breakdown of Adepticon. That's really not what we're trying to do here, is get into the nuts and bolts. I will say this though, Darcy, who took second place and got first place with the painting competition.
She won the narrative and one of the 2 competitive best painted awards, and she came in 3rd in the best painted, or not, but 3rd for best general at the competitive event. So if there had been a best overall, well, who knows, because the person who won best general came 2nd for best painted, so who knows which of them would have won best overall. But she dominated, is a classic double threat for potentially winning best general and best painted at your event. And you've had her on the podcast, like you said, yeah.
Yeah, we had her on the podcast, maybe it was a year ago. Maybe even a little bit longer. She was one of the first artists I found when I started painting, in the beginning. We're talking 2018. And I was looking up Necron paint schemes. I don't even know why I was looking up Necron paint schemes. I wasn't painting Necrons, but I did, and I was just like, I want a Terminator version, the one with red glowy eyes, not green glowy eyes. I want red glowy eye Terminators. You know what I mean? From Terminator 2 Judgment Day kind of thing. And sure enough, she painted up a whole bunch of them like that, and I was like, I'm in love with her paint schemes because they were just so good. Yeah. And she's gotten even better since then. She somehow keeps leveling up, and I'm like, girl, I thought you were at the top of your game, and you just keep leveling up. You're about to evolve into a next stage of Pokemon Painter here. I don't know what's happening, but she's amazing. She's such a great lady too. So nice. I'm glad that she's playing Warcry, and her painting, and did I see it right? Her base or her display board was a slice of wood.
Yes, it was, and it fits so well with her autumnal forest themed Beasts of Chaos, right? Think about that. Beasts of Chaos, right? Yeah. Animals marauding the wilderness in an autumnal theme with a tree cutout as their display board, and then she had she had put kind of terrain on the tree cutout, but then it was like the bark and everything were around the side. Just incredibly artistic, like beyond just good technique, it was also good art. One of the things
got amazing taste.
Yeah, one of the things that came out of Golden Demon was, some layperson fans were angry at kind of the winners being just technical marvels that weren't artistically that interesting. Some of the winners were absolutely artistically incredible, but all that's to say, she had a piece at the competitive event that was just both technically and artistically really, really, really amazing. And then I think at Golden Demon she said that she got a commendation pin, so she didn't win anything, but she got the little pin saying that you were close. So
that's cool.
That's really impressive too.
Oof, if she didn't win anything, I'm like, I have no hope. But now, to be fair, the Nova Open has a painting class for you and me, buddy. Right? It's the not like professional painters.
I do love that they've sort of siphoned off the Darcys and all of the professional painters into their own category, and then they've got a journeyman category, and I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, definitely. So, but it sounds like Adepticon was amazing. I'm so glad that they had 2 competitive tournaments and a narrative. I think that's so great. That they had that. Was it what you expected?
I didn't really know what to expect. One surprise I did get was, I've in so many of my videos I've talked about how much I value being able to kill really small, sort of cheap chaff units efficiently. Mm-hmm. And I saw a lot of people bringing Stormcast and a lot of people bringing Untamed Beasts to the tournaments. Untamed Beasts, I think it's because they're in the starter box and Iron Golems are bad.
That's fair.
So it's like you have these 2 starter warbands, and one of them's a lot stronger than the other. So you're going to this tournament and you're going to bring your Untamed Beasts. And they were, people were rocking the cats, giving the cats extra attacks. Nobody went 3-1 or better in the competitive tournaments with them, but people were on 2-2 all over the place. There were a ton of Untamed Beasts players who were 2-2, which makes sense. It's like they can absolutely hang with the best AOS warbands, but it's like the very, very best are probably doing something a little bit more powerful. But yeah, the Untamed Beasts, if you've got your starter set, if you kind of want 2 cats, which there's only 1 in the starter set, but yeah, a 2 cats Untamed Beasts warband is a really solid entry into the competitive side of the game. You can absolutely win with it. And then a lot of Stormcast. I didn't expect Stormcast because they have so many list building issues. We should cover Stormcast on this podcast sometime, but
we definitely will.
They have a lot of list building issues, other than the Vanguard don't, but the rest of them do. So I didn't expect to see so many of them, but I forgot, they're the intro to the setting, so of course people have them. So of course you're always going to see them. They're always represented a ton in regular AOS. Of course they were going to be in Warcry, and I should have thought about that. And so I would tell people, if you're going to go to a tournament, even though I would say for what's powerful, you need to kill lots of toughness 3 really quickly and really efficiently, you do want at least something in your warband that can cut through toughness 5.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Right on. Well, with me running the Nova Open, competitive tournament for Warcry, I have a question here. In our ideal world, what would this event look like?
Yeah, like the Nova event? Man, so I thought they did a lot of things right and a few things wrong at Adepticon. And the few things wrong are not their fault. Like, the tournament organizers... so the ones for the narrative event were the Dogs of Warcry podcast.
Yep.
They absolutely love Warcry. You could tell by the way they had just done the little things, like they'd written their own narrative for the game. They had a plan about lots of different rules, gray areas. They kind of had a plan of what they think is cool, or like how they wanted to play it. So you could kind of tell that then in the competitive event, GW had put their sort of rules down from on high, which I think is fine, right? GW sort of has a right to do that. But then the narrative, or the competitive organizers, they hadn't really heard of Warcry, to be honest. I think most TOs are, well, maybe not around the country, but most TOs attached to Adepticon are kind of old 40K guys.
Okay, that makes sense.
And, not old as in disparaging, like, they created the hobby. It's amazing, right? It's amazing to talk with them and pick their brain about the history of the game. But they're not into Warcry because Warcry's pretty new, right? To them.
Right.
To them, when Warcry launched 3 years ago, that's like, yesterday. So that part was tough. Like, it was hard to really get a solid ruling, out of the TO. You needed to kind of talk to maybe some of the more experienced players who weren't in your game, for example. They also were doing all of the pairings and scorings via pen and a pad, which had been a decision made by the larger event staff. So the guy running the Warcry tournament, I think he did an amazing job with the hand he was dealt, as far as having to TO a game that he had only played a few times 2 years ago, and having to do all the pairings with a paper and pen, which is a lot of fiddling and figuring out to do paper and pen style. A lot of bookkeeping to do by hand. I think he was an incredibly brave soldier, but I do think it maybe kind of overwhelmed him a bit, and there were times when it was a little awkward. So that would be the one thing I would say. Use a computer app. I know you have a relationship with the BCP folks.
Yep.
I think that's a good way to do it. I think a lot of, if you don't have a subscription to BCP, you can use most Magic the Gathering tournament software to do non-Magic the Gathering tournaments. So if you're an organizer of a card shop and you don't have BCP, but you do have one of the Magic softwares, use something like that. There's actually even a chess pairing software, right?
Yeah.
Just use a computer. It
makes a big
makes
difference.
it so much easier. Yeah.
And I'll point out too that BCP for tournament organizers is free.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you don't have to have a subscription to run an event. The only subscriptions that they sell are for players if they want to have track your stats and get access to lists and be able to see tournament results more than a few days after your thing. So for example, if I played in a Rogue Trader tournament for Age of Sigmar, I can see all the lists of the people that I'm going to be in, but after 2 days it's locked. So if I want to go back and look at those lists, then that's where the subscription would come in. And you can look at any list across any event. And so the most competitive players absolutely have subscriptions to that, because they want to see what people are running all over the world, really. And but if I'm a tournament organizer, then it is free to use. And if you are a tournament player, it is also free to use. So you don't have to have the subscription. That's part of the reason why I do like BCP for what it is, right? And I believe that they have a Warcry module in there already. I don't know how good it is, which kind of brings me to my next question. In an ideal world, if I'm running an event, right, we have let's say we've got 32 people. Yeah. 5 rounds gets you to 1 undefeated person. But if you want to keep it to 4 rounds, just because you don't want people to get too tired or something like that, you're going to need something that helps differentiate between a couple of the undefeateds, right? So, what do you think does that? What should you be tracking? Victory points, number, points models killed. What do you think? Secondaries, that whole thing.
Tournament points, I found, actually do a pretty good job stratifying people. So you get major victory, minor victory, draw, major loss, minor loss, and then you have your one hidden agenda point.
Uh-huh.
I actually found that was stratifying people pretty well, because a lot of people, the first competitive tournament, there were actually 2 undefeated players at the end, but one of them had 3 major victories and 1 minor victory, and one of them had 2 minor victories. And so that did it. It would have been nice to get a final between them, but it wasn't necessary for at least picking a winner. And I do think in general the person who had the 3 major victories had been a more convincing 4-0.
Yeah.
But the other person also beat everyone ahead of them, so you could definitely say you'd want to see a finals, but I think you can get away without it if you have 4 rounds.
Yeah. How did they determine what was a major victory, minor victory, that type of thing?
Yeah, so the Toma Champions has a really nice little guide. Let me see what page it's on. But so the guide tells you, what their idea of what a major and minor victory is. So they say, let's see, here it is. If you win the battle and less than half of the fighters in your warband, so the winner's warband, are taken out, then you get a major victory, 20 points. If you win and more than half of your warband is taken out, you get a minor victory, and you get 15 tournament points for that. So you still get a lot, right? And then a minor loss is you lost the battle, but you took out half of the winner's warband. So what I like about this is it doesn't matter how many people of the loser's warband get killed.
Yeah.
Because it's all about whether the loser can kill enough of the winner's warband. So basically, it incentivizes, if you're winning, you want to play really careful and conservative. And if you're losing, you want to take big risks to go up from a major loss to a minor loss. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of gives you more to play for, even if you're losing late in a game, which I think is cool. And the fact that there's some point stratification for that is cool.
Yep.
There's 12 hidden agendas now, as opposed to there's only 6 in the core book, so they added 6 more in the Tome of Champions, which I think was really smart, because only having 6 hidden agendas and having to use 4 of them for a given tournament before was it's basically random, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're getting, right, because you just don't have enough choices to actually be doing any strategy there. But now, with 12 choices, you have things that your warband might be tailored to achieve, even late in the tournament, which I think is really cool. So I would just use that scoring system. The only thing is they don't give you an option for a draw. And one thing we found over and over in these tournaments was, it's actually with 4 rounds, it's actually really easy to end up with a draw. And a lot of the best, even some really, really fun, really awesome missions, they still end up where there's a certain amount of points and you can end up tied on points. And a lot of the time it's up to either you play another round or you just go by kill points, but those can often be really unfair. A lot of the time the person who's winning on kill points wouldn't win if there was another round. So at least having the option for a draw, certainly if you've got lots of time in the round, choose a tiebreaker, but having an option for a draw where both players get 10 points, I think is good to have. And also, further differentiates the players so that you get sort of a wider range.
Now, with the hidden agendas, would you list out all 12 and basically say you get to choose one per round out of any of the 12, or would you curate it down to maybe 8 or something like that?
I would let people use all 12, even though I don't think all 12 are very interesting, because just they're in the book, so people might see you're saying hidden agendas and then think, okay, I can take any of the hidden agendas. Right, so if you cut some even though I agree some are better than others and some are more interesting than others, if you cut some of them, then you kind of, if someone was counting on that one and then you cut it, they might just go like, well, why'd you cut mine? Why'd you cut my hidden agenda versus others? So
yeah,
I would
exactly.
just include all of them. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds good. Very good, very good. What missions would you say? Like, what's a good balance of missions in an ideal, let's say, 4-round or 5-round tournament?
Yeah. So, one of the things I did in a video about sort of how to write a warband list is I kind of split mission types into 4 different types, which is objective missions, which are anything with objectives, hunter missions, which is anything where you have to kill something of your opponents while stopping them from killing something of yours, treasure missions, anything with treasure, and then kind of, I call them area control missions, but there's a bunch of missions in the game where it's like you take control of an area, or you get to an area while forcing your opponents out of that area, and it's not like a fixed point like an objective. It's like a huge swath of the battlefield. So they play a little bit differently than objective missions do. I would want to have, a spread of those 4 types, with the caveat that most treasure missions are kind of bad. Most treasure missions, if you go first, you're winning it's like if you go first, you're like 85-90% to win. So some treasure missions are pretty good, but some of them are really awful. So,
and we had talked about, I think it was even in our last podcast, right, about the idea of maybe house ruling a treasure mission, which is you can't, you move at half speed because it's heavy or something like that, right?
You could do that.
Would that fix it? Would that fix it, you think, or was it still an
I
issue?
I wouldn't run that in a big tournament unless I had run it at like many small tournaments and it had worked well. You know what I mean? Like, I think big tournaments are not the place to debut those. You talked actually with James O'Brien in your winning Warhammer one, or was it the one with the BCP guy? I don't know. I listened to both of them, and they're both sort of about running events.
Yeah.
But you had talked, and both of them kind of, I think, said things about how, like, being experimental is really, really important in Warhammer tournaments, but it's not a good fit for the big tournaments. So I think...
the local tournaments or your gimmicky tournaments, and I call them gimmicky because they're usually like focused on a certain thing, right?
Right. It's not a value judgment. It's just like a word about there is a shtick going on.
Exactly.
It can be a good shtick. It can be great, but yeah, there is a shtick. Yep.
Exactly. So like let's mess around in these smaller tournaments where people know exactly what they're getting and where they're getting it. Not at the Nova Open or, some of the Warhammer Open series type of thing. Because people have certain expectations on how those events need to be run, and good, bad, or ugly, right? Like, expectations.
Exactly. So there are some treasure missions that aren't insta-win for whoever goes first. If I was going to include a treasure mission, I'd kind of hunt through maybe the Red Harvest cards for it. I think the Red Harvest treasure mission is okay. I think there's some in the base game. I think maybe there was one from the last TOC that was okay. But for some of the others, I think the objective missions in the new TOC are really good. I think Scour is a better version of the Red Rover mission from the base game.
Yeah.
Scour being, it's Red Rover, so just get to the other side, but you get a point for getting a kill. Which I think is really good. And I think that mission's actually shockingly balanced in a way that the first Red Rover mission was not.
Right. Yeah, the first Red Rover one was a little tricky.
Yeah. And speed was just way, way important, whereas now, you get points for kills. So, you can decide not to just try to get to the other side, and you can just try to... You can win by only stopping your opponent from getting the other side, even if you never get there yourself, which I think is a good adjustment. And then trophy kills is not my favorite hunter mission, but it is good. I think all of the hunter missions are pretty solid. and Trophy Kills is the new one out of the Tome of Champions. It's one of my least favorite hunter missions, but I like all hunter missions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
so it's solid, but if you wanted to pick one out of the base game and just say extending it to 4 rounds now, you could absolutely do that.
Yeah.
I think Bloodmarked is, for my money, Bloodmarked is the best mission in the game. That's a hunter mission, but I would just want to include a hunter mission, and it could be Trophy Kills, it could be lots of different things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had asked you this when I was debating on whether or not I was going to actually accept the assignment to run the tournament. But I asked you this question: should people submit their list beforehand, like a week or two beforehand, and should they be separated into their Hammer, Dagger, Shield already?
So I think making people commit to Hammer, Dagger, Shield is really important, because otherwise people get to fudge it when they see the deployment. And that is fine at the bottom tables, but if it happens in the mid or top tables of a tournament, it's real problematic. And there's a lot of eyes usually on on the finals, but let's say if it's 2-0 players and then someone's, it's you don't want that happening. So I think forcing people to commit their Hammer, Dagger, Shield before the tournament is important. The one place, so yes, I would say for any competitive event, make people submit beforehand. But the one thing that I thought worked really well that they did at Adepticon was they told anybody walking by at hey, you can join,
Oh yeah.
And they got 2 people they got 1 on each day from just saying that, and I think that was great. And they told those people, listen, you in particular don't have to submit a list.
Right.
And I think that was good. I think telling people on the wait list that they don't have to have it, right? I think that's okay. At the end of the day, this is a game that needs to get traction and to grow and to just communicate to people how fun it can be.
Right.
And
I 100% agree.
If we're giving out trophies, I think we should make people follow the rules. I do think that for folks who don't know the game well, they're probably not a big threat to win the event anyway. And so letting people join last minute and then just be okay, separate them now, let's take a picture, and that'll be your, doing something real quick to help them write it down real quick, I think would be good, because, I think encouraging as many people to play as possible is always a good thing.
Yeah, and I think doing a little bit of Q&A before the event starts, right? Being able to make sure that, you have the right amount. You can't have more than 50% in your shield. You have to have at least 1 fighter in each group. You have to, you know what I mean?
Yep.
You just making sure that people are following those rules with it, because I'll be honest with, sometimes I'll separate the 3 and be like, oh wait, hold on. Do I have this right? Yep. And I know that newer players don't really think about that too hard. They're just thinking okay, well, what's going to be better? And especially if you are showing the deployment missions ahead of time, which I've gone back and forth with Jason on this. Should you put out the pack that has the deployment missions in it a month in advance? And I think you should. I think it lets players plan warbands for it, which makes it more competitive, right? If everybody's got all the same information, you've got a fair tournament.
Agreed.
And so, letting players plan for it, letting them understand what the hidden agendas are that they can choose from, letting them know what the victory conditions are, what the deployment zones are going to look like, and all that. I think that's really important for players to be able to do. What that also does is it lets them say, okay, well, I know that my Hammer, Dagger, Shield need to look like this, right?
Yep.
And the flip side of that is that you may get a less experienced player look at those things and be like, oh man, I really need to put a bunch of these people in my shield or my hammer, and just overbalance, overcompensate because they want to get more people on the table at one time or something, and inadvertently break one of the fundamental rules of Warcry of the list building, so.
And I think one thing you can do to kind of strike a balance there is you could say, here are 6 missions. I am going to, we will randomly choose 4 of these 6.
Right.
Or here are 8 missions, and we will randomly choose 4 of these 8. or even, you know, round 1 will be randomly one of these two, and then round 2 will be one of these two, and then
Right.
you know, like you can do a lot of stuff to kind of strike a balance there between the two things you just said. Yeah.
Yeah, so that you've got you still got some of that random feel of Warcry without making it too random that it can't be competitive, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really where the balance goes. So these are all great ideas. I can't wait to start working on this tournament pack and getting it together. Obviously, I'm going to be leaning on some of your expertise in helping pull some of these ideas together into a comprehensive pack as we put it out. I know you're going to be playing. But at the end of the day, like, even if you help me put the pack together, I don't think that that's going to give you a leg up, because everybody will have the pack anyway, right? So
as long as we get it out a long time in advance,
Yeah.
I won't have a leg up. If we end up putting it off and then I'm not involved until late, I'll probably pull out and say I can't be involved. But
I think that's fair.
as long as,
I'd like to get it out sooner than later. So
yeah, if we get it out like 2 months in advance, then I'm just gonna shrug and be like, listen, like you had 2 months to look at this. There's nothing that I could have figured out in 3 months that you could not have figured out in 2 months. You know.
Right. Exactly. So, but yeah, I'd like to get it out sooner than later so that I can make sure that I am prepped for what I need.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of running it. So, but yeah, I love your experience that you had at Adepticon. I can't wait to do this at Nova Open. I think there's one thing that you said that is the key to all of this. We want to grow the game, right? We want to make this a game. I get personally like affronted. I start clutching my pearls, a little bit when people are like, Warcry is not a competitive game. It's too random. I completely disagree with it. I think it can be a very competitive game. I think it can be a very fun competitive game. I think it's all in how you approach it, set it up, and run it, right? That will make it a good event or not.
Yeah, the guy you had on your BCP podcast, he seems like a great guy, but he clearly just didn't understand Warcry very well when he was like, the opening dice roll makes it too random, and it's like, well, actually, the reason it is a good competitive game is that you can mitigate that randomness with your list building really effectively, and smart Warcry players will do so, and they will have ability plans for all of the most common dice rolls, and to say that makes it non-competitive is just ignorant, which, people are allowed to be. Everyone's ignorant of something, right? But it was just funny to hear him say that, because he was so wrong. And I thought you did a good job not starting the fight, because it was clear that he just wasn't interested in learning. But
I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Because I really disagreed with that statement, obviously.
And he's a 40K player, and he's really passionate and has done a ton for the game. Like, again, this is no judgment on him. It's just I think a lot of people who haven't played much Warcry have a lot of very wrong understandings about it.
Well, and the other thing too is he really hates the double turn in Age of Sigmar, and I think that that's an interesting indicator as well, right? Because it's like any great Age of Sigmar player knows how to plan for that double turn, no matter what. By not overextending yourself, by positioning yourself that you can take advantage when you do it, versus not getting exploited if you don't get it. So.
Well, I'm a bad Age of Sigmar player, and I don't know how to play for the double turn. And maybe listening to your Winning Warhammer podcast, or your Talkin' Warhammer podcast, maybe I'll learn.
Yeah, hopefully. Did you sign up for the Grand Tournament for Age of Sigmar?
I did, yeah.
Oh,
so I will get my butt whooped, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll have a blast. It's going to be awesome. So, anyway, but listen, thanks for joining me again. Obviously, I love talking Warcry. Like, there's so much to discuss. So. It's a lot of fun to dive in and dig into some of this stuff. So if you guys also enjoy it, be sure to like and share it with your friends. We love getting the word out about this game, and we just want to make sure that everybody's getting a good understanding and wants to play more of it. So thank you guys for your support and listening to it, and have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you next month.
Yes, definitely.